Hi, welcome to the Fit and Healthy Show. My name is Heike Turchiano and I'm your host, and today this gleeful face will be talking about a not so gleeful subject of depression. I'd like to address some facts first of all about depression. It is the most cost-rendering disease in the United States of America, costing job loss, insurance costs, name it, medical costs. It is the most costly disease that we have in this country, believe it or not, above heart attacks and cancer. Women are 2 times more likely to suffer from depression, and they say the biggest reason has to do with a lot of additional amounts of stresses, and oftentimes they basically say that women just don't get enough healing and feeling time, and so women are twice as likely to suffer from depression. Depression is defined as sadness that persists over a prolonged period of time, or it just seems to be more exaggerated for the actual event that's occurring. So when we look at that, then under no circumstances should those types of persistent or over-exaggerated periods of time of depression be ignored, because those people who have those lengthy times of depression, 1 out of 8 of them commit suicide. So this is something that has to be taken very, very seriously and observed by family members and friends, not to be ignored. When we look at symptoms, the ones I have listed up here are the most common symptoms. However, there are other symptoms that are known that you may know personally about the individual. If they start doing things that are not within their normal personality or who and what they do or their activities that they do. Inability to enjoy things. No spark in life. They feel helpless and worthless. They'll talk themselves down. They'll talk other people down. They get irritable. They are not able to sleep oftentimes, or have a lot of disrupted sleep, or they'll sleep through in the middle of the day and not be able to sleep at night. So sleep disturbances. Increased anxiety or anxiousness. A drop in sexual drive for married adults. We'll see that as well. They just don't have a desire too much for anything other than to focus on what they're depressed about. And sometimes they don't even know what they're depressed about, particularly if it's a physiological cause. Headaches, backaches, digestion issues, your stomach will start to hurt. Because when you're depressed and not feeling well, your body doesn't produce adequate amounts of enzymes, certain types of hormones. You don't digest your food well. Oftentimes you don't eat very well when you're depressed. You'll sit there and down the bonbons or something to try and cheer yourself up. Because sugars do help cheer you up, but it needs to be the right kind of sugars, and we'll talk about that later on in our discussion. So these types of things, also the suicidal thoughts, and oftentimes they'll talk about them or not talk about them, and that's a more difficult thing to detect depending on the person, him or herself. The causes. Okay, we can look to physiological causes. We know that the neurotransmitter serotonin is primarily the main transmitter responsible for mood elevation, making us feel good. There's a lot of other ones as well, but when we look traditionally at depression, we look at serotonin. Now, serotonin is made by the brain, the intestines, and other tissues from an amino acid called tryptophan. And tryptophan is found in various types of foods. And so when people's amino acid ratio fluctuates or is not in proper balance, having to do with dietary issues, and they lack tryptophan, they're not able to manufacture serotonin. A deficiency in something called glial cells, or some people pronounce glial cells. These cells are brain cells which are necessary to carry various nutrients to the brain. And when there's a lot of inflammation in these glial cells, which are located in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, you're not going to get the nutrients, you're not going to get serotonin, you're not going to get things carried into this frontal cortex, and you're going to get depressed. Inflammation is the primary problem with the glial cells, and that the blood sugars cause inflammation, food allergies, all these types of things cause these to get cells to get very inflamed, and then the nutrients can't pass the barriers that are in the brain. Poor diet and allergies. we discussed. That could be food allergies, that can be environmental allergies. They cause us to become very, very, very inflamed. So diagnostically, we need to find out or recognize what foods we're allergic to and avoid them. Or what environmental sparks cause us to have allergic reactions. Avoidance is always better than taking medications in regards to allergies. Always better, particularly with food allergies. Nutritional deficiencies. Obviously, if you're lacking certain types of B vitamins, you're not going to manufacture serotonin, B12, folic acid, B6. These are all very, very important B vitamins that are necessary for the manufacture of serotonin and other things as well. Lacking essential fatty acids. 60% of our brain consists of essential fatty acids, DHA and EPA. And if we don't have these adequate amounts of fatty acids, we can't carry the information between our nerves, and then therefore we can't also permeate the cells to deliver those responses. Candida, yeast. The sugar hogs love and are filled most of the time with yeast, also known as candida. There are other forms of candida, multiple forms of candida. But the yeast cause brain fog, they cause inflammation. So the sugars that people are eating are causing tremendous amount of inflammation, in addition to the food allergies and environmental allergies. Hormones and hormonal fluctuations in the brain. Multitudes of different types of hormones. Thyroid hormone can affect the brain. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone balances, DHEA. Those hormones are very, very vital for maintaining certain bodily functions that are necessary and therefore can contribute to the brain not working right. Heavy metals, alcohol, in the same category because they're both poisons. Heavy metals, mercury, fluoride, the good old fluoride treatments, store in the brain tissue, and that was research from World War II that was done, and fluoride, mercury, heavy metals from computer operations, from pesticide chemicals, all these store in the brain. And they cause the brain not to be able to properly replicate nerve cells, inflammation, the list goes on and on. Certain medications also cause an issue or raise the likelihood of depression. High blood pressure medications, nobody would really tend to think about those, but they do. Certain types. Certain antidepressants contribute, and actually there's now warnings on certain antidepressants that actually say that the risk of suicide actually increases with these usages of these. Narcotics, antihistamines can cause. So the good old, remember I mentioned it's best to handle your allergies by elimination and other means. The antihistamines really can make problems with the brain and how the brain transfers nutrients and information as well, leading to depression. Corticosteroids, prednisone, any type of steroidals that is used as an anti-inflammatory can lend itself also to depression. Lack of sunlight. There is a disorder called SAD that a lot of people suffer in the wintertime because they have a lack of sunlight exposure. So exposing your eyes at least 30 minutes a day to some type of sunlight without the good old sunglasses on is preferred. Sunlight is kind of necessary for human survival, and I know most people say avoid the sun at all costs. I understand the sunscreen for most people is important, but you do require sunlight to stimulate certain types of hormones in the brain, in the pituitary. So, blood sugar and chemicals we discussed a little earlier. When your blood sugars rise, you become very acidic, you get very inflamed. I know if I've had a weekend vacation where I've had a lot of sugars, I'm a bit dopey the next day. My brain processes don't think as well. I just don't function as well. So keeping those sugars down, and particularly if you have diabetes, is a very, very, very important thing to do. All right, we kind of touched on diet a little bit earlier, but I want to mention it briefly, but it is obviously the most important factor when you're talking about depression, in my personal opinion. Balancing the sugars, particularly complex carbohydrates, not sugars. not the junk, not the bag of potato chips, not the cookies. No, we're talking complex carbs, mean good wholesome vegetables, leafy green vegetables, organic preferably, because once again we know that chemicals and chemical allergies are very, very common and increase inflammation and depression as well. Good sources of protein. The brain actually requires protein to work, and a lot of people are going off to work with that good old bowl of cereal, and then they do that quick little muffin for lunch, and then they have their dinner, and then they wonder why they're depressed. If you don't have adequate amounts of protein, the brain can't do what it needs to do, and it will get depressed. So you need to have at least a minimum of 3 balanced meals per day that have complex carbs, good fats, and proteins in them. Better if you can have those 4 to 5 meals, but if you can only do the 3, keep them balanced. Put some thought into your food, people, because if you don't, when you get to be older and as things grow with time, you'll have more depression, you'll have more potential for Alzheimer's, you'll have more other health issues. This diet issue is the most important thing that I could stress. The things that we know can trigger depression, more so dietary-wise, is sugars, saturated fats, the junk, heavy meat fats, French fry fats, all that kind of stuff. Those saturated fats, the brain gets very, very, very sluggish. And so you don't want it to be that way. You want it to be perky and peppy and moving and doing good. So you need to avoid those trans fats, heavy saturated fats, and keep the sugars down. Avoiding foods that trigger allergic reaction, very, very important. And the chemicals. I found this an interesting fact that my husband had read to me this weekend was in the United States, we have over 1,400 different chemicals that we add to our foods. In Europe, they have 4. So the chances of an allergic reaction to chemicals is mind-boggling here in the United States because of all the chemical additives we use to our foods. They're not wholesome, fresh, unprocessed foods. Avoid alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. It will bring you down. And so avoiding something that brings you down is always the best. Obviously, a nice little half a glass of wine with a meal occasionally is fine. But excessive uses of alcohol is a depressant. So don't use it to pick you up because it ain't going to work. Exercising, getting the circulation going, getting the body going, and later on in the show I'll show you a really good routine you can do to get the brain working and get your body moving and to raise some of those endorphins. Exercise raises a feel-good hormone called endorphins. Well, feel-good hormones called endorphins. They make you feel good, give you energy, they make you happy, they make you where you need to be. So that exercise in whatever form you choose is very, very, very important. I've listed a series of supplements that I know have very good research, not just here in the States, but in other countries as well. Japanese research, European research, Chinese research, all valid non-pharmaceutical company research. And then my personal experience that I have in operating health food stores, I found these right here seem to be some of the most effective ways to do it. We talked about tryptophan earlier as being necessary for the body to manufacture serotonin. If you can't find tryptophan-rich foods or you don't eat them, you can do tryptophan on an empty stomach a few times a day. 5-HTP is a precursor to tryptophan, which can also aid and abet with serotonin production. SAMe helps you metabolize the serotonins that you do produce, and then there's really good research. We have a few physicians in town that recommend SAMe with very good success, and my customer feedback on SAMe to help with depression, phenomenal. Fish oils, great European research. Ginkgo biloba, a combination of ginkgo biloba and phosphatidylserine seem to help a lot with seniors because seniors oftentimes have poor circulation in their brain and they lack that fatty acid substance called phosphatidylserine. So if we add those in, that can raise their feel-good types of antidepressant as well. B complex, remember how I mentioned earlier that you have to have Bs in order to utilize